House in Baltimore, and than I am at this point. The Stanley Cup champion, Washington Capitals, and a conversation with the great Smokin Al Koken, who, as far as, I've waited a long time, but then there are guys like you, Al, who have waited forever to come on and recap such a thing here for our Baltimore audience that remembers your days with Forns back at Home Team Sports and DC 20 and all of that. It's been a long, crazy trip. It was kind of worth it, wasn't it?
Yeah, now I can say, yeah, sure. We waited 44 years. I've been doing it 33 years on TV. So, yeah, it's been worth it. But, the great thing about this, Nestor, has been just watching the fan reaction to all of this. I mean, I know people have been very nice and say, oh, man, it must be great for you and great for you. Yeah, but it's been really the best for the people who have suffered the most. Listen, I get to a game, but I get paid to be at the game. Now, am I, happy for the team, and am I happy for the people involved, particularly a gentleman that I know we'll be talking about that you and I are both familiar with from his days in Baltimore, and now being able to say I'm a Stanley Cup winning coach. But it's been the fans. It's been the people who were nice enough to come up when we were broadcasting on NBC Sports Washington outside of Capital One Arena on F Street, and the amazing turnout and people saying, like you did, hey, man, I remember you with Mike Forns back in the day, or I remember I was there when the Dale Hunter goal was scored against Philly, and you gave me this high five. All of that outpouring, all of that support, all of that touching, touchstones with each other to say, hey, you were there in the beginning, I was there in the beginning, or maybe I was younger and didn't realize what was going on, but now that I'm older, man, do I really appreciate it. All of those things have stood out to me this entire time on terms of how the fans have reacted. And let me also say one other thing. Something else that has been truly amazing to me. You follow sports, all sports, very closely. There has been 0 incidents. Now, I wasn't expecting anything, but at the same time, you live in a modern metropolis, and particularly for long-suffering fans, we've seen how people, little small pockets of idiots have behaved in other towns.
Well, they were Criscoing the polls in Philadelphia 3 months ago, so it's not that far.
And some clown on a dare ate horse manure from a police source. There have been fires. There have been, idiots breaking windows. There was 0. The turnout for the parade, they had a little blurb in the paper on the next day on Wednesday talking to both D.C. Metropolitan Police and National Park Police. 0 arrests for anything. Now, I'm not saying that isn't, the standard that should be kept, but let's be honest. In the modern day, that shocked even me, and I could not be happier that this celebration was just nothing but pure joy, and the idiots either stayed away or they were just so overwhelmed with everybody being positive that they didn't even bother to do anything.
Smokin Al Koken is our guest. They love him up at Della Rosa's in Bel Air. He's real Smokin Al out on Twitter, and you can follow him as well. And I think all you guys need to towel off a little bit, man. In covering this for the first time all the way to the end, and I kind of came halfway into the party. I didn't go to Columbus in the beginning, and I have such respect for the players, but you guys as broadcasters in and out every other night, it's quite a run. And the fact that how short the summer is going to be here this summer before they have to go back and do it again, you really have a respect that I always had, quite frankly, for teams that are playing hockey in June with these, crazy beards and all of that stuff. And I always wondered what Ovi would look like with a, 12-week beard. And now I know of all of them. I know what, Holtby, all those guys look like, but there's such a grind to it, and there's such a relief to it that watching these guys jump around in fountains and watching the celebration at the parade, it's almost like letting the air. It's a lot different than baseball or football that feel like you get them over pretty quick in 4 or 5 weeks. This doesn't work that way. Different kind of tournament here.
No question about it. And I've always contended that, and maybe because of the limited numbers, that baseball is the hardest playoff to get into, but the hardest championship to win is without question in my mind hockey. And for people who didn't really realize that or appreciate that until they were watching hockey in June and watching the team they rooted for go through this experience and the ups and downs, as you mentioned, down 0-2 to Columbus, ready to be oh, here we go again, and have a team literally be blown up in front of them because they failed to get out of the first round, and have that all switch around to now hoisting the Stanley Cup. It's an unbelievable undertaking, and to now get an appreciation of what these guys really go through. And listen, we know that football players have played with tremendous injuries, the Jack Youngbloods of the world, the Ronnie Lotts chopping off fingers to play. I get that. But you also realize, too, that once the playoffs are over and you realize, oh, yeah, by the way, Nick Baxter was playing with not one but two fractures. Oh, by the way, Brooks Orpik had the tip of his finger chopped off in a slash. Oh, by the way, it just goes on and on and on. And they show up every other day. They play. They sacrifice their body. It's a tremendous undertaking. And again, no disrespect to baseball. I'm a huge baseball fan, but let's also be honest, Nestor. For all the people that are giving the Capitals crap for never getting past the second round, if you are a non-wild card team in baseball, as tough as it is to get in, if you find yourself winning 7 postseason games, you're in the World Series. The Capitals have won 7 postseason games multiple times, but they never got to past the second round until this year. So it shows you how difficult it is to finally get that ultimate prize. They really have got to extend themselves emotionally and physically, and that's what I think makes it so rewarding for the guys when they finally do win it.
Al, when I talk to everybody about this, I've written a couple of books on these championships with the Ravens, and one of the parts of writing a book, and I'm doing this Dear Orioles series now where parts don't relate, but when you're trying to do a book on a team and write that storybook, there's that, what's the lead story here? Where do you begin? And obviously it begins with the day they drafted Ovechkin for this group, but then beyond that, it probably really is the day Barry Trotz signed on, because that's what's led to this new generation of these last 4 years with Orpik and Niskanen and the additions and the TJ Oshie deal, and where they've been in signing Kuznetsov and signing Oshie and the disappointments and all of those. Game 7 in New York and Game 7 against Pittsburgh, and watching Pittsburgh and what Pittsburgh represents. It's so rich. I mean, the McPhee story and going to, and having to beat Fleury in the end and exercising all of these demons throughout the playoffs. It's really been a wild story. Like if someone were to, I talked to Ted Starkey, if you write the book on this thing, it really is rich with storylines all the way through, right?
Absolutely. And let's also bring in, when the Capitals finally turned the corner, and we're talking about not just here this year, but what you just did, talking about the history of the franchise, David Poile. You bring David Poile in, nobody knew who the hell he was, and he inherited Brian Murray. Now, Brian Murray's story in and of itself, Abe Pollin at the time was going to hire Don Cherry. Brian Murray was the coach of Hershey, the top farm club, okay? A courtesy interview was given to Brian Murray. And I remember Brian Murray telling me this one day. He said he knew he walked in there with nothing to lose. So after a few beginning courtesies with, Mr. Pollin just asking him some, general questions, Brian basically said, okay, I got nothing to lose. He goes, Mr. Pollin, aren't you tired of losing? And he said that kind of, bristled Abe a little bit. He goes, of course I am. And then he goes, and are you tired of watching your team get pushed around? And he then almost started interviewing Abe. And he walked out of there not knowing what was going to happen, but ultimately Abe decided, you know what? This is the guy I think should be the next coach, not the name that I knew of Don Cherry. So David inherited Brian, but the two of them put together 100-plus point teams back in the day when there was no loser point. You didn't get a point just for getting into overtime and losing. That was earned by only getting W's, picking up 2 points for wins, not picking up that extra point for a loss. You had to earn it. And those 100-point teams never could get over the hump. There was always a goaltender this or something else happening on that. So, yeah, then you go through the Boudreau era, and Bruce Boudreau got this team also in a tremendous spot but could never get over the hump. So, yeah, I agree with you. When you write this story, there are so many times when you thought, this is the group, they're going to get it done, this is the mix. They finally found it and could never get it going. Even in 98. Now, they were running up against a team that I don't care how good the Capitals would have been. I don't care how if Essetekin had knocked that goal in Game 2 in Detroit, they still would have lost to the Detroit Red Wings because that's one of the great teams of the modern day.
They could have played that Team 10 series, best of 7.
No
they might have not gotten to a Game 6.
No question. Now, they could have come back and extended the series a little longer than getting swept in 4. But that's my point. It's just that. And as you said, you're writing a book on the Ravens. I mean, look at the Raven championship years, getting it done as wild card teams on the road, winning games. I mean, there are so many twists and turns that have to take place. This year, you and I talked about it the last time I was on the air with you. This team hit rock bottom and was ready to get Barry Trotz fired in November when they lost in Nashville in an awful performance, and then 2 days later were even worse in Colorado. And to Barry's credit, he read him the riot act, and to the credit of the leadership in that locker room, when they came back, they won the next game. They lost the game after that, but the veteran leaders had a Saturday loss and a Sunday day off looking at him, and they went into Barry's office after the loss on Saturday and said, get us back on the ice. And instead of taking the day off, which every pro athlete, particularly the long sports, not to the 16-game sports, but the long sports like baseball, basketball, and hockey, a day off is worth its weight in gold. But the veteran leadership said, get us back on the ice. And after playing on a Saturday night, the team they were going to play on Monday, Ottawa, had already booked the 11:30 ice time at Kepler. They went on the ice at 10:30. Think about that. Play Saturday night, go back on the ice at 10:30 on a Sunday morning, even if it was going to be a day off. That's what turned this team around, and it was hand in hand with a great coach and a leadership group that was put together in many regards by the guy hired on the very same day as that new head coach, Brian McClellan. So those two coming in together 4 years ago and getting the job done together, that is certainly something that I can say when you write the history, as you point out, those are the moments that turn this franchise to a Stanley Cup.
He is Smokin Al and real Smokin Al out on Twitter. Al Koken is our guest, of course, of NBC Washington, and on this ride from the very, very beginning of Capitals history and chronicling all of this. I guess when you say what was the differentiator, we always knew it would have to be Ovechkin, right? Like your best player needs to be that guy. Maybe not. In football, it has to be the quarterback, right? I mean, to win a Super Bowl, to get through 3-4 games in the playoffs, your quarterback has to play exceptionally well in order to do that in that sport. Now, obviously, we've seen LeBron and what's going on in basketball, but specifically in hockey, I don't think you can be the best player in your team and not be that guy over 10 weeks. That guy you're going to talk about being an MVP of a whole tournament, as Alex Ovechkin was named in the Stanley Cup. But it has to be him. I think we knew that all along, that he wasn't going to be a mediocre cast member on a Stanley Cup team here. He was going to need to be fit and healthy and motivated and wiser than maybe he was when he was younger and less fluent in the culture and more naive and maybe not in the best shape. All of those things, I really put it on him to say that there's another level for that kid that maybe some of us doubted at various points because maybe he didn't take it as seriously as he needed to.
I would agree with that. I think he always took the feeling of I've got to be a great player personally and understanding the relationship that would then have on his team. But in regards to would he do the finer points that the coaches always would ask of him in terms of, okay, like Barry has admitted it. He said, look, Alex, when you do the things that we ask everybody else to do, the entire team buys in. When you block a shot, the entire team says, well, then I got to block shots. When you get back and the first man back defensively, then the entire team says, I've got to be back defensively. These weren't things that Alex Ovechkin necessarily didn't do, but he didn't do it with the absolute hardcore commitment that he made this year. Now, whether it was just finally the embarrassment of saying, I'm always going to be known as a great this, a great that, but I'm never going to know what it's like to be a champion in the National Hockey League. If that's what it took, I don't know. But he did buy into the little details. He's never been a selfish player. Nestor, you've watched him. When he scores a goal, he celebrates. When his teammate scores a goal, he celebrates even harder. He's always been a guy who wants to be what's good for the team, But sometimes when you are a superstar, sometimes when you are the guy who is always expected to hit the big home run, you know, every once in a while, if they ask you to bunt, you may not be able to do it as successfully. Well, this year he learned how to bunt. This year he learned how to not just throw 99 miles an hour, but you know what? Get your change up a little better. You know, all those little details never were going to take away from how great a player he was, but now those little details help turn him into a championship. But let me also say one other thing. I agree with you that your stars have got to be stars to get to a Stanley Cup final. But you can't, in my mind, and this is just my personal opinion, you can't win a Stanley Cup without the Devontae Smith-Pelly.
Oh, no question.
Lars Eller.
No question.
You know, I mean, and that's what makes this whole thing so beautiful. How many years have we walked away from a Caps-Pittsburgh series, and not because Crosby has played poorly, and Crosby's played very well, but how many years where you walked away from a Pittsburgh series where you talked more about Bonino and Cullen than you have about Crosby and Malkin, right? I mean, those seem to always be the guys that would stick to daggering. It would be a Bonino goal, a Hornquist goal, a Cullen goal that ended up being the goal that you go, damn it, that's what killed it. Well, look what got him this year.
Al, for 6 weeks, I said it was going to be Brett Connolly. Right? For 6 weeks, I said Connolly's going to score the ultimate game winner. He shot it. He didn't score it, but, you know, there was some help on the other side. And, look, there was enough oxygen for everyone, right? And that's part of the star power, too, when I look back, let's say, 8-10 years ago when they're losing to the Flyers during the Boudreau era, and you'd say, well, it was a one-man team like LeBron. You know, you have to have that cast, and you have to have that cast that's bought in. Oshie has become the star of all stars in all of this, right? Like, he's going to be the guy with the endorsements, and this is going to live beyond for him. And, you know, I think the wake-up for him coming from your hometown out in St. Louis was something as well. I mean, there's incredible spokes to how much better Kuznetsov has gotten, how much better Burakovsky's gotten, how much better Kempny and Smith-Pelly were here under the fire, and also how calm they all were. You know, like, there was always this agitated, nervous energy about the team that sort of was deflated. Even in the Pittsburgh series, I found them to be calmer this year for some reason.
Well, once they got past Columbus from literally, as we talked about, impending doom to suddenly a sweep, and then obviously once they got past Pittsburgh, although I think they approached Pittsburgh with a little more confidence because of what happened in Columbus, and also, too, let's be honest, an anger. John Cooper, the Tampa Bay coach, I think put it perfectly. He said, Alex Ovechkin is playing with the anger of 13 seasons. You know, whatever it was for that entire team, they funneled that hatred and that anger after spending the first half of the season hung over with grief because of how it ended against Pittsburgh. They took that little late portion of the season run and then the success they had against Columbus and faced Pittsburgh with a different attitude. And there was no question they seemed to be better prepared for the Penguins this year than they were last year. But again, it happens because you spread the wealth, as you talk about. So you mentioned Brett Connolly, the guy I kept talking about, and the guy everybody kept saying, so who's going to be the key to this series? I kept talking about Jacob Vrana because I just kept thinking this kid is getting chance after chance after chance. And early on in the series, the finals I'm talking about, man, he had a ton of chances and couldn't get anything to go. Well, look who scores the first goal in the game in Game 5, the clinching game, right? I mean, everybody seemed to step up at the right time for this team. And that's what makes team sports, in my mind, so spectacular. Yeah, Joe Flacco and Alex Ovechkin will get all the focus, but man, you ain't doing it without a great defense, without a great defensive line. You're not doing it without great goaltending, without, as you said, the Michael Kempney suddenly making John Carlson better because he finally had a partner that allowed John to be John as opposed to, I got to mentor a young player to my left. All those things, when you look at it, the tumblers finally clicked, and boom, they were able to crack that safe.
No one with the history with the Washington Capitals can appreciate this more than Smokin Al Koken. He is real Smokin Al out on Twitter. You can follow him. I hope that we don't see you for a little while. You get a little bit of rest. You, Carlin, May, all you, Joe B, everybody, Locker, everybody. Last thing for you on Trotz. And, as we speak, this thing can go either way, and, contracts and feelings and all that. But the situation itself, taken into, a bubble of 4 years of what he's done, where he's come from, and the fact that, look, I'm not being disrespectful to Ted or to McClay or any of these guys. They bet against him, and now I don't know what that means psychologically. I don't know what that means for, Minnesota or the Islanders or anywhere else that he could have been a bidder or he could go coach in the future or he could sit out and broadcast like you and I do for a little while and wait for the next job to come along. But it is a very, very unique circumstance, and I don't know that it was a good circumstance. I think this organization has done so much right, and I felt that way. Orpik and Niskanen and the amount of money, right signings. I felt like Shattenkirk might be the one thing where you'd say, well, maybe that wasn't the right thing. And certainly we could go back with the trade with the Predators. We'll play the Forsberg story forever. And I'm done. I'm over that. I just mean in the modern sense, Barry Trotz was signed. The acquisitions, the signings, the players, the guys that have gotten on the ice, the injuries, the problems they've had, all of that. They've had a really nice run, kind of like the Orioles did a couple years ago. Every Wei-Yin Chen was right, every Miguel Gonzalez, and that's kind of the way it works when things go right. But the Trotz thing, boy, that was a little sloppy. How that's been handled for me, for a guy that if you don't believe in him, let him go, but don't dangle and sign the assistant coach. I found that to be a little weird, Al.
Well, I'll tell you what. I think Barry will tell you himself, Nestor, to be perfectly honest with you. He was a different guy this year, too. I think he needed to learn a little bit. There was a difference. Let me tell you just, and again, it relates personally to me, but I think it illustrates the bigger picture I'm trying to present here. During the playoffs, as you know, we get to do as a broadcast group the first round, and then the networks take over. So we do our usual broadcast. Now, they have been tremendous in allowing me access to the bench to talk to the assistant coaches, associate head coach Todd Reardon, Blaine Forsythe, and Lane Lambert, okay? And during the season, it's never a problem. During last year's first round, all of a sudden access was completely denied. Things started to get different. They were handled different. The access to just general media things, everything changed. And I know that there were a couple players that told me that after the very first period of last year's game against Toronto, where they were getting run out of the building. Now, again, this is the first period of the very first game. He came in there and kind of laid down like, what the bleep is going on here? And a guy like Justin Williams, a veteran, was like, whoa. Hey, this is just the first period. Everybody chill out. Everybody was just overwrought and over-anxious. You know what happened this year? You want to come on the bench and talk to the coaches? Come on to the bench and talk to the coaches. You watched him at press conferences. Did he look like a guy that had a single moment of stress
He
about
looked
him?
like a guy that had done a Tony Robbins firewalk, and apparently he did. So,
Right.
I mean, literally, I had been talking about their calm for 8 weeks, Al. I mean, last time I had you on before they won the Cup, throughout the Cup, and being around them, as much as I was, it was just a real pleasure watching all of them. I felt like there was an integrity and a professionalism and a maturity and a grown-upness and an accountability throughout this thing that it made me become a bigger fan of the people that were involved in this thing and guys that really won a championship and deserved it. They did it the only way you could do it in that sport, the hard way.
Right. But my point is that Barry also had to change. We talked about Ovechkin making adjustments. Barry had to change as well, and that's why I don't think in the big picture. Listen, I hope now that he basically says, we're not really having a contract negotiation. Here's my number, So to his credit, he put it out there just the way like Kirk Cousins did here for the Redskins. You don't want to sign me to a long-term deal? Fine. Now I'll get my money from you or somebody else. But those are the things, though, that had to change, I think, within Barry. And let's also be honest here. If this thing went south, as it looked like as I talked to you a few moments ago about that little November thing, it would have just been Barry Trotz let go. At the trade deadline, you would have seen guys, maybe even a guy like a Nick Backstrom, dealt. You would have seen this team blown up. It wouldn't have just been, hey, we're making one move, and that's getting rid of Barry Trotz and appointing Todd Reardon as the head coach, and we're keeping everybody else here. They would have changed things dramatically. I'm telling you, the whole thing would have changed, and not just with the coach. So it wasn't just a referendum on Barry. It was a referendum on the entire team, and do we have the right mix here? That being said, I couldn't be happier for him now, because he's got him over a barrel, and I hope not that, he's too classy a guy to make them pay and humiliate, but he will make them pay financially, and I guarantee you they want him back. I just don't think it may not have looked right, but I truly don't believe it was done for any moment of saying, you know what, let's find a scapegoat, and we'll have his replacement standing by, and we can pull that at any time. This was really a referendum about a lot of things beyond just Barry Trotz.
He is Smokin Al Koken. He's the real Smokin Al out on Twitter. You can find him. He'll be hibernating here this summer. I don't know what you do in the summer. I hope it's hibernate, but it's not going to be a long summer here. We got awards coming out. We got drafting coming out, and they'll be back down. It's crazy, man.
It's insane, right?
This is what happens when you play into the middle of June and drag us out into Vegas in 105-degree heat. At least there was no 6 or 7
games in September, right? Here we go.
I'm ready for more hockey. Al Taloff, it was a hell of a ride, a great parade, a great memory. I've told everyone, I was out with the Ravens this week, and I said it just was a great experience in my life to have been around it and to have been as close to Barry as I've been for 30 years and experience it kind of sort of from the inside. It's something I'll never forget. I mean, really, not something I ever expected, something I could have never bought a ticket for, like, as you know, right? You can't buy it, you can't will it, but we were in the right place at the right time this year for sure. It was a lot of fun, man.
It was great. And happy for Barry, happy for a lot of really quality people inside that entire organization, people you don't really know about, like Craig Leidig, who's done over 2,500 games as the equipment man, one of the assistant equipment managers. People behind the scenes, you know better than anybody, Nestor. They never get enough credit. So it was a great thing. And I'll tell you, that's another thing that I thought was really special about that parade. When they introduced everybody, two of the biggest cheers, one was for Craig Leidig, and the other was for Rob Tillotson, and this amongst the players I'm talking about, who is the director of team services. So you can start to see what a good team is all about when it's not just the stars standing out there and say, look at me, that how they reacted to the guys. Nobody knows who they are. That, I thought, also spoke volumes about this team, and especially the way they've handled the Stanley Cup. This wasn't, hey, you want to watch us while we stand behind velvet ropes inside a fancy club or inside some mansion. No, you want to come touch the cup? You want to hang out with us in Georgetown? You want to watch us have fun? It's for you too, fans. And I thought the way they handled that couldn't have been better either.
Big chance to grow the brand. That's part B of our conversation next time, Al. We'll see where we go in September and the level of expectations. But it's been a wonderful little ride here and a fun thing that I never thought we'd have, that we had, and we soaked it in. We drank it all up, man. We're still going to drink it up. And I know we won the Stanley Cup because my hat says so.
That's right. You can keep referring to that at any time.
I got pictures. I even remember some of them. Al Koken is our friend, real Smokin Al. Great to have you on, Al. Enjoy the summer.
Nestor, thanks, man. We got to get to De La Rosa at some point.
Keep wearing the hat. We'll make a drink especially for you.
Got it, brother.
There
thanks,
he goes.
Man.
Real Smokin Al is the way to find him out on Twitter and at NBC Sports in Washington. He is Al Koken. You can find me out on the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Just download the TuneIn Radio app. Hockey, a lot of dear Orioles coming your way here as I write letters to everyone in the Orioles organization. Challenging them to get better. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.